Freya stood trembling on a mountain road, snow crusting her fur like armor. 2 German shepherd puppies, Atlas and Luna, were pinned beneath her chest, their breaths so thin they barely fogged the air. No one stopped on that pass in a storm like this. No one, except Logan Pierce, ex-Navy SEAL, empty heart, no destination.
Good girl.
When he swung open his truck door and reached out, Freya
It's
didn't
okay, I
snarl
won't hurt
or
you.
run. She leaned in, nose to palm, like a decision. And in that single touch, something in both of them broke open. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more. Logan Pierce kept both hands on the wheel as if the road might try to shake him off. The wipers slapped a losing rhythm, smearing the world into streaks of white and shadow. The heater blew warm air that felt undeserved. He drove anyway, past the last gas station, past the last lit porch, past the point where the town disappeared behind a curtain of falling snow. He told himself he was just clearing his head. That was the lie he used when silence got too loud. The truth was simpler. The cabin waited with empty rooms and a name that still echoed off the walls. Claire. Some days he could keep the memory packed away like a sealed crate. Some days the lid cracked and everything spilled out. The curve came up slow through the storm. Logan knew it by feel more than sight. The guardrail that bowed outward, the bank that dropped too steep, the pines that leaned like they were listening. Years ago, someone had gone off here. A small wooden cross had been nailed near the rail, bleached pale by sun and buried by winters. Logan always eased up when he passed it, not because it changed anything, but because grief had turned that spot into a landmark. Tonight, his headlights caught something darker than the snow. At first it looked like a fallen branch. Then it shivered. Logan's foot hit the brake. The truck slid, fishtailed once, and stopped with a soft crunch as the tires found powder. His heart didn't race. His body saved that reaction for things that mattered. But his chest tightened anyway, like an old scar pulling. He leaned forward, squinting through the glass. A shape hunched low against the drift. Bigger than a fox. Not a deer, and too still. Logan shoved the door open. The cold hit him like a hard hand to the face. Wind poured into the cab, ripping heat away in seconds. Snow immediately found the inside of his collar. He stepped out and sank to his boots. The air smelled of pine and iron-cold earth. "Hey," he called softly, because something in him knew loud would be wrong. "Hey there." He moved down the shoulder, careful on the slick, and dropped into a crouch. That's when he saw her clearly. A German shepherd mother, black and tan under a crust of frost, curled so tightly her body made a shelter. 2 tiny pups were wedged under her chest. One lighter in the paws, one darker, both trembling so hard their whole bodies fluttered. The mother lifted her head. Amber eyes locked onto Logan like a sight line. No growl, no bark, just that stare, sharp, exhausted, evaluating. Logan knew that look. He'd seen it in stray dogs in war zones, in civilians at checkpoints, in young soldiers bleeding out who still tried to pretend they weren't afraid. It wasn't aggression. It was a question asked with everything a creature had left. He swallowed. His throat felt raw, like he'd been breathing smoke. "It's okay," he said, voice low and steady, the way he used to speak when chaos threatened to swallow the room. "I'm not here to hurt you." The wind kept screaming, but the moment around them narrowed into a small circle. Breath, snow, and that pair of eyes. Logan unzipped his jacket with stiff fingers. He pulled off his scarf and held it out, not touching her, just offering it into the space between them. The mother's nostrils flared. One pup made a sound that barely qualified as a whimper. The sight punched straight through him. Claire's last winter came back without permission. A radio playing too softly, tires hitting black ice, the sudden wrongness of the world tilting. The memory always ended the same way. His gloves slick, his voice begging, her lips pale as she tried to give him comfort he didn't deserve. "It's not your fault," she had whispered. He had never believed her. Now, kneeling in the snow, Logan felt the same helpless rage rise in his chest. Not at the storm. Not at the road. At the part of life that kept daring him to watch something die in his hands. "Not tonight," he murmured. "You're not dying out here." He inched closer. His knees sank deeper. Snow soaked through the fabric fast. Cold biting into his skin. The mother didn't retreat. She just tracked him, muscles taut beneath frost. Logan extended one bare hand, palm open. His fingers trembled, not only from cold, from the act itself, reaching out, choosing. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the mother leaned forward. Her nose touched his fingertips. Cold, damp, alive. Something inside Logan cracked, quiet but unmistakable. He blinked hard and felt heat gather behind his eyes. He hated that he cried easily now. He hated that grief had made him porous. But the tears came anyway, carried off by wind. "Good girl," he whispered like a confession. "You're safe. I've got you." He lifted the lighter pup first, careful as if the puppy might break from being touched. The little body was too light. Bones and a faint spark of warmth that could vanish at any second. Logan tucked the pup inside his jacket, against his chest, and felt the smallest flutter of breath. The mother watched. Tense, but still. Logan reached for the second pup. The mother shifted her weight, and for the first time Logan saw how much it cost her just to move. She was running on the last thin thread of will. He tucked the second pup inside his jacket too, cradling both against his heat. Then he looked at the mother. "Come on," he said gently. "Please." He stood and turned toward the truck. Wind clawed at him. Snow filled his footprints almost as soon as he made them. He reached the back door, swung it open, and eased the pups onto the seat where a blanket lay folded. Forgotten emergency gear he'd never needed until now. When he turned back, the mother was still in the road, half buried, staring as if the idea of warmth sounded like a trap. Logan walked toward her again and dropped into a crouch, keeping his shoulders relaxed, his hands visible. "I'm not taking them from you," he said. "I'm taking all of you out of this." He offered his hand again. The mother's ears twitched. Her gaze flicked toward the truck, toward her pups, then back to Logan. She rose slowly, legs unsteady, and limped forward one step at a time. When she reached him, she pressed her nose to his palm again, not soft but certain, like signing an agreement. Logan exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He guided her toward the open door, close enough to protect, far enough to let her choose. She climbed into the cab with a heavy, careful movement and curled beside the back seat, eyes never leaving the pups. Logan slammed the door shut. The wind went muffled. The heater's hum returned, small and steady. He sat behind the wheel, hands shaking now that it was over, now that it wasn't. In the rearview mirror he saw the mother's amber eyes watching him, not grateful, not trusting completely, just awake. And for the first time in a long time, Logan felt the smallest stubborn thing in his chest that wasn't guilt, responsibility. He put the truck in gear and turned toward home. The warmth of the truck didn't fix anything. It only bought time. Logan felt it in every mile, the thin line between alive and too late. He drove one-handed and kept glancing back, then forced himself to look forward. The cabin came into view like a dark thought in the storm. Pine logs, stone chimney, porch half buried under drifts. A weak ribbon of smoke rose from the flue, the last of a fire he'd left smoldering earlier. Logan parked close and jumped out, boots sinking deep. When he opened the back door, the two pups stirred inside the blanket, tiny bodies trembling like they were remembering the cold. The mother, Freya, lifted her head, eyes sharp despite exhaustion. Logan didn't know her name yet, but the sound formed in his mind anyway. Freya. Fierce. Guarding. "We're here," he said softly, as if the words could build safety out of air. "Let's get you warm." He carried the mother first. She weighed less than she should have, ribs too easy to feel beneath her coat. She didn't fight him, but her body stayed rigid, prepared to bolt the second he slipped. Logan held her close to keep her steady, feeling the small drumbeat of her heart through layers of fabric. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine resin, old coffee, and engine oil that never quite washed out of his hands. It was one room made of survival. A brick hearth, a worn couch, a small table by the window. The walls held things he avoided looking at. 2 frames sat on a shelf above the mantel, both filmed with dust. One showed a younger Logan in uniform, eyes harder, smile thinner. The other showed Claire in a field under summer light, hair blown back by wind, laughing like she'd never heard the word ending. Logan's gaze snagged on that second photo for half a beat. Then he looked away, the old reflex kicking in. Don't touch it. Don't open it. If you open it, it will swallow you. He set Freya down on an old wool rug near the hearth. She folded herself instantly, turning so she could face both the room and the door. Guarding even now. Logan moved fast. He went back out, scooped the pups from the truck, and carried them in against his chest. They were so small they fit under his palm. He wrapped them in a spare flannel shirt and laid them against Freya's belly. Freya nosed them immediately, one, then the other, counting, checking. Only when she was satisfied did she let her head drop, chin resting near their backs. Logan crouched by the fire and fed it 2 split logs, flames caught with a sigh, orange light spreading across the room like permission. He watched the pups breathing, uneven but there. He watched Freya's ears flick each time a log shifted, each time the wind knocked snow against the window. He should have felt relief. Instead, he felt the old familiar tension, waiting for the next thing to go wrong. "Okay," he murmured, more to himself than them. "Okay. Stay with me." He didn't know why the words came out like that. He hadn't said stay to anyone since Claire. Not out loud. Minutes stretched. The pups trembled less. One made a tiny sneeze that sounded like a spark. Logan's mouth twitched, almost a smile, then gone. He reached out slowly and brushed 2 fingers over the lighter pup's head. Soft, warm now, the fur no longer stiff. The pup wriggled and nudged into the touch, fearless in the way only something too young to understand death could be. Logan's chest tightened again, but this time it wasn't pain alone. It was something like tenderness. Strange. Unfamiliar. "You," he said quietly to the lighter pup, testing the sound like a rope thrown across a gap. Atlas. The name felt steady, a little too big for a creature that could fit in one hand. So it fit perfectly. Something small carrying something heavy. He glanced at the darker pup, tucked tighter against Freya. The pup's eyes were barely open, but it refused to be moved, as if it already understood the value of staying close. "And you," Logan whispered, "Luna." Freya's ears flicked at the names, not understanding the words, maybe understanding the intent. The pups settled again. Logan leaned back against the hearthstones, heat soaking into his shoulders. He stared at his hands, scarred, calloused, capable of violence and repair. He'd used them to pull people from wreckage. He'd used them to hold a rifle. He'd used them to sign papers he didn't read. He'd used them to grip a steering wheel while the world spun into black ice. Now, those same hands hovered over something that trusted without proof. A knock sounded at the door. Logan's body tensed before his mind caught up. Old training, old instincts. He stood and moved to the window first, peering out through the frost-edged glass. A small figure stood on the porch, bundled in a thick coat, a lantern glow behind her. The wind tugged at a gray scarf. She waited with the patience of someone who had lived long enough to know you can't rush fear out of a man. Logan opened the door. Cold pushed in again, but softer now compared to what he'd faced on the road. The woman stepped closer, cheeks flushed, eyes clear. "Mr. Pierce," she said, "I saw your headlights out by the curve. In that weather, I figured you might need something." She held out a basket. Steam rose from a thermos tucked inside. Logan hesitated, then stepped aside. "Maggie Rowe," he said, recognizing her at last. She lived down the road, kept to herself, waved when she passed, never asked questions that cornered you. "Just Maggie," she replied, and entered like she belonged to the world without needing permission. Her gaze landed on the rug by the hearth. Freya lifted her head, watching. The pups shifted. Maggie's expression softened so quickly it startled Logan, like warmth had always been her default setting. "Oh, honey," she whispered, crouching with a quiet groan of old knees. "You poor thing." She reached out, slow, palms open, and Freya didn't snap. Maggie touched the mother's neck with 2 fingers, gentle as a prayer. Logan watched the interaction with a strange tightness in his throat. It shouldn't have mattered. But it did. Because Freya was letting another human near. Because Maggie wasn't afraid. Maggie opened the basket and pulled out a small bottle. Then another. "Ginger tea," she said, setting the thermos on the table. "And antibiotics. Not a perfect match for everything, but it's what I've got. I keep a little stock. Long winters make you practical." "You didn't have to," Logan began. "I know," Maggie said, and her voice left no room for argument. "But you did, didn't you? You stopped." Logan didn't answer. He couldn't find a sentence that didn't sound like an excuse. Maggie's eyes drifted to the mantel. Logan felt a brief flare of panic. "Don't look there. Don't touch that." But Maggie didn't comment on Claire's photo. Instead, her gaze caught on something Logan hadn't noticed before. A small framed picture Maggie had set down near the door when she came in, the glass rimmed with frost from outside. A young Marine in desert cami smiled from the photo, arms slung around the neck of a big German shepherd. There was a date written on the bottom edge in neat handwriting, 2008. Logan's chest tightened, and not just from empathy. Recognition. The particular shape of a mother's loss. Maggie followed his eyes, her mouth pressed into a line that wasn't bitterness, just truth. "That's my boy," she said quietly. "Corporal Nathan Rowe." Logan's voice came out rough. "I'm sorry." Maggie nodded once. "I don't want your pity. I just understand storms." She looked at Freya again, then at Logan, as if weighing him the way Freya had on the road. "You were military," she said, not a question, more like she'd always known. Logan's jaw tightened. "A long time ago." Maggie's gaze didn't flinch. "You don't stop being what you had to be. You just try to learn how to be something else after." The fire cracked. Atlas squirmed. Luna pressed closer to Freya's belly. Maggie stood and rolled up her sleeves. "Show me where you keep your water. And do you have a clean cloth? If she starts running hot, we'll want to be ready." Logan blinked, caught off guard by the certainty in her tone. Not bossy, not invasive, purposeful. He nodded once. "Yeah, I've got something." As he turned toward the kitchen sink, the cabin lights flickered. Once, twice, then steadied again. Logan froze. Maggie noticed. "Power line's been groaning all day," she said. "If it goes out, we'll manage." Logan looked at Freya. The mother dog's breathing was still shallow. The pups were warmer but fragile. Outside, the wind sharpened again, and the snow pressed harder against the glass. Time, he realized, was still hunting them. And now, at least, he wasn't hunting it alone. The lights died, and Freya's fever climbed like a threat with teeth. Logan felt panic snap through him, sharp and familiar. He dropped to his knees beside the hearth and pressed his palm to her ribs. She was burning. Atlas and Luna huddled against her belly, nosing for warmth that suddenly felt dangerous. Too hot, too fast, wrong. Freya's breathing had changed, each pull a little thicker, a little wetter, as if the cold she'd outrun on the road had followed them inside and decided to attack from within. "Hey, hey, stay with me," Logan whispered, more command than comfort. The cabin sat in a pocket of storm where sound got swallowed. Outside, wind shouldered the pines and threw snow against the window like handfuls of gravel. Inside, the fire was the only steady thing, orange light licking the walls, turning dust motes into drifting sparks. Logan moved on instinct. He crossed to the corner where a battered toolbox served as storage for everything he never wanted to admit he still needed. He flipped it open and stared at the contents. Gauze, iodine, tape, a couple of pain relievers, an expired vial of something he wouldn't trust on a rat. Nothing for a dog burning with infection. The power clicked once, half a heartbeat of electricity, and then went out for good. The silence that followed was heavier than the storm, like the cabin had been sealed inside a snow globe with no air left to breathe. Maggie's voice cut through it, calm as a hand on the shoulder. "She's running a fever. We can't wait." Logan turned. Maggie Rowe had already shrugged off her coat, cardigan sleeves pushed up, gray hair coming loose from her scarf. She crouched beside Freya and felt behind the dog's ears, then along her chest with gentle pressure. "She needs antibiotics," Maggie said, "and we need to manage the heat. Not shock her, slow and steady." Logan stared at her. "You sound like you've done this." Maggie didn't look up. "I raised a boy who came home with scrapes the world didn't see. You learn how to be steady when everything else isn't." Freya let out a low, exhausted sound, not quite a growl, not quite a whine. Maggie held her palm open, letting Freya sniff. The mother dog didn't relax, but she didn't snap either. Logan's jaw tightened. The old helplessness rose in him. Same taste, same weight, a body failing, time running out, a promise he didn't know how to keep. "I'm going to your place," he said, already reaching for his parka. Maggie straightened. "It's past dark and the storm's building. I've walked through worse." Maggie's eyes sharpened on him. "So have I." Logan hesitated only long enough to hate how much he needed help. Then he nodded. "I'll be quick." He pulled on gloves, a scarf, and a headlamp from a hook by the door. Before he stepped out, he looked at Freya again. Her amber eyes tracked him, dull now, but still aware. "I'll be back," he said, voice rough. "Don't you quit on me." Outside, the cold hit like punishment. Snow was up to his shins immediately, deeper in drifts where the wind had stacked it. His breath came out in thick bursts of white. The world was reduced to what his headlamp could carve, 10 feet of shifting snow and the black bones of trees. The distance to Maggie's house was less than a mile. Tonight, it felt like a dare. Logan kept moving, leaning into the wind, boots breaking crusted layers that wanted to hold him. The storm moaned through the valley like something alive. For a second, he flashed back to a different kind of blindness, sand instead of snow, heat instead of cold, a radio crackling in his ear with names that became casualties. This was quieter. That made it worse. When Maggie's porch light finally appeared through the snowfall, it looked like a lifeline. Logan climbed the steps and knocked hard. The door swung open almost immediately, warm light spilling across him. Maggie stood there, already dressed, as if she'd been waiting for the knock she knew was coming. "Come in before you freeze solid," she said. Her house smelled of rosemary and old wood polish. Family photos lined the mantel, smiling faces in uniforms, a younger Maggie beside a broad-shouldered man, and the one Logan couldn't stop looking at. Corporal Nathan, Nate Rowe. Desert camo, arm around a German shepherd like the dog was part of him. Maggie followed Logan's gaze. "He used to say the dog saved him as much as he saved the dog," she murmured. Then she went straight to a cabinet and began pulling bottles out with practiced speed. "These," she said, handing Logan a small container, "will cover most infections. You'll crush them and mix with water. She may not eat, so you'll have to syringe it slowly." Logan's fingers closed around the bottle like it weighed 100 pounds. "Thank you." Maggie grabbed a portable heater off a shelf. Battery-powered. It won't last forever, but it'll help, and she shoved a thermos into his hands. Tea. For you. I can't take your last. Yes, you can, she cut in, voice firm. I've lived through harsher winters than this. Besides, her eyes softened. You're not the only one who needs saving tonight. Logan swallowed, throat tight. I'll get you back inside fast. Maggie was already pulling on her coat. You're not going out there alone. Not with a life on the line. They stepped into the storm together. Logan kept one gloved hand on her elbow whenever the wind tried to take her off her feet. Maggie moved like someone who'd spent a lifetime refusing to be fragile. Short, sturdy, stubborn. Exactly the kind of person grief didn't manage to break. By the time they reached Logan's cabin, both of them were shaking. Logan shoved the door open and heat from the hearth hit his face like mercy. Freya lay where he'd left her, but her breathing had worsened. Atlas and Luna whimpered, small and thin sounds that cut straight through bone. Maggie dropped to her knees beside Freya immediately. All right, she said, voice steady. We cool her down gradually. Snow water, small amount, cloth, and crush those pills. Logan moved fast. He melted snow in a pot near the fire, soaked a cloth, and dabbed Freya's paws and belly, careful not to shock her system. Maggie crushed the tablets with the back of a spoon, mixing the powder into a thin slurry. Logan found an old syringe in his kit and filled it. Freya lifted her head weakly when Maggie touched her jaw. The mother dog's lips curled a fraction, more fear than anger. I know, Maggie whispered. I know you don't trust easily, neither do we, but you have to take this. Logan eased the syringe into the side of Freya's mouth and pressed slowly. Freya swallowed once, then again, eyes half-lidded, fighting the urge to spit it out. Good, Logan breathed. Good girl. Hours dragged by in a rhythm of small, relentless tasks. Feed the fire, keep the heater close, cool her paws, check her breathing, steady the pups when they panicked. Logan split wood until his arms burned. Maggie stayed beside Freya like a sentry, murmuring soft words. Sometimes instructions, sometimes prayers. Sometime after midnight, Atlas and Luna finally stopped crying and fell asleep, curled together, tiny bodies rising and falling in sync. Logan watched them and felt something in his chest unclench by a single notch. Maggie leaned back against the couch for a moment, exhaustion lining her face. Logan handed her a blanket. She took it, then stared into the fire as if it held a memory. Nate didn't believe in medals, she said quietly. He used to tell me, Mom, the only thing that matters is what you do when nobody's watching. Logan stared at the flames. Sounds like a Marine. Maggie's mouth twitched, half smile, half ache. He was, and he loved that dog like it was part of his own heartbeat. Logan's gaze slid to Freya. Her breathing, still heavy, had begun to steady. Not much, but enough to matter. He heard Claire's voice in his head again, softer this time, not accusing, just present. Maggie looked at him without pity. You've been fighting something for a long time, she said. Logan didn't answer. He didn't have words for the war that happened inside silence. Just before dawn, the storm eased. The world outside the window shifted from black to slate gray. The cabin felt like it had survived a siege. Freya stirred. Her head lifted a fraction. Her amber eyes found Logan's. She exhaled, slow and deep, and the sound wasn't a struggle anymore. It was a breath. Logan held still like sudden movement might break the moment. Relief flooded him, quiet but immense. He let it happen, even though part of him wanted to reject it as a trick. Maggie reached over and squeezed his shoulder once. Small, grounding. See, she whispered. You showed up. Logan stared at Freya, at the pups asleep against her, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not peace exactly, but the possibility of it. Weeks passed after that night. The snow thinned. The road reappeared. Atlas and Luna grew into clumsy, fearless troublemakers who turned the cabin into a place that couldn't stay quiet. Maggie visited often, sometimes with soup, sometimes with nothing but company that didn't demand explanations. Logan patched a leak in the roof, fixed a broken latch, and one evening, without meaning to, he picked up Claire's old harmonica from the mantel and played a shaky note into the firelight. On a morning that smelled faintly of melting snow and coffee, 3 sharp knocks hit the door. Too firm to be Maggie. Freya's ears snapped up. Atlas and Luna froze mid-wrestle. Logan's stomach tightened as he walked to the door and opened it. 3 hard knocks shattered the cabin's new rhythm. Logan felt his pulse tighten, and his mind went instantly cold. He wiped his hands on his jeans and opened the door. A man in a dark green jacket stood on the porch, snow dusting his shoulders and cap brim. The patch on his chest read, State Wildlife. He was in his early 40s, broad through the shoulders, face weathered by wind and long days outside. His eyes weren't cruel, but they were trained, the kind that missed nothing. "Logan Pierce?" the man asked. Logan held the door half open, keeping the warmth inside. "Yeah." The officer lifted a badge for a brief second. "Wyatt Hale, Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Mind if I ask you a couple questions?" Behind Logan, the fire popped. Atlas and Luna were silent now, their bodies tense in the way only animals could be when they sensed authority. Freya stood from the rug, moving between the pups and the doorway like a wall with a heartbeat. Logan's instincts flared. Old muscle memory, the immediate assessment of threat, exits, distance. He forced his shoulders to loosen. This wasn't a raid, this was a porch. "What's this about?" Logan asked. Hale's gaze flicked past Logan's shoulder, catching the outline of Freya in the firelight. His posture shifted a fraction. Cautious, but not afraid. "We've had reports of a large canine near the protected zone up the ridge," Hale said. "Some folks are saying wolf hybrid. Illegal breeding's been an issue in this county. When we get a report, we verify." Logan's jaw tightened. "They're dogs. German shepherds." "Maybe," Hale said, voice even. "But they're untagged, and the call mentioned a mother with pups. Matches what I'm seeing." Logan didn't move aside. Who called it in? Hale didn't take the bait. "Doesn't matter. What matters is compliance. If you're harboring domestic dogs, it's simple. Registration, vaccination records, any proof of ownership or adoption. If there's a chance they're hybrids near a protected area, the state requires evaluation." Freya let out a low sound, barely audible, but it vibrated through the room like a warning. Her ears pinned back, her eyes locked on Hale's boots. Hale noticed. He took a half step back, slow. "Easy," he murmured, not to Logan, to Freya. "I'm not here to hurt anyone." Logan turned slightly, placing himself between them without making it obvious. He lowered his voice. "I found them in the blizzard. By the curve near the old cross, they would have died." Hale studied him for a long second. "You live alone out here?" "Yes." "And you brought them in without reporting the find?" Logan exhaled through his nose. "I reported what I could by keeping them breathing." Hale's expression softened a notch, just enough to show there was a person under the badge. Then it firmed again. "I get it, I do. But caring and paperwork aren't the same thing." Atlas gave a small, uncertain whine. Luna pressed into Freya's side. Freya didn't stop staring at Hale like she was memorizing him. Logan swallowed. "They've been here for weeks. They're healthy now. They're not wild." Hale reached into his jacket and pulled out a small notebook. "You have vet records?" "No." "Microchips?" "No." "Collars with tags?" Logan's eyes flicked toward the table where he'd been working. Scraps of leather, a brass tag he hadn't attached yet. He'd planned to. He'd been meaning to. The words felt pathetic, even inside his head. Hale scribbled. "Look, Mr. Pierce, Logan, this doesn't have to turn ugly. You get them registered. You get a vet to verify breed. You show proof these animals are domestic. Then it's done." Logan's throat tightened at the word proof. And if I can't? Hale paused. Then I have to take them for evaluation. The sentence landed like a punch because it was so clean, so official, like loss could be filed and stamped. Logan felt the cabin tilt for a split second, not from dizziness, but from memory. A different kind of official voice, a different kind of order. He saw desert light and dust, heard a radio spitting commands. He remembered the day his team had been forced to leave a wounded K9 behind after an ambush. The dog had tried to crawl after them, blood darkening the sand, eyes still searching for its handler. Logan had argued, begged, got shut down. He'd carried that failure home like shrapnel. Now Hale's words echoed in the same place that shrapnel lived. Not yours to keep. Logan blinked once, hard. They're not property. Hale met his stare steady. No, but the law treats them like responsibility, and responsibility has rules. Freya's growl deepened, a quiet thunder in her chest. Logan dropped a hand to her neck, fingers sliding into thick fur. Easy, he whispered. It's okay. Freya didn't ease. She pressed closer to Atlas and Luna, tail low, body angled as if she could launch through the back of the cabin if she had to. Logan could feel her trembling. Not weakness. Calculation. Hale kept his voice calm. Here's what I can do. I'll give you time, but it can't be a week. I have to document a timeline. Logan forced his breath to slow. How much time? Hale glanced down at his notes. 72 hours, 3 days. Get a vet to confirm. Start the registration. Show me something that proves they're domestic and legally kept. If you do, I close the report. And if I don't, Logan said, already knowing the answer. Hale's shoulders rose and fell with a restrained sigh. Then I come back with animal control, and I don't want to do that. Logan stared at the officer's boots, at the snow melting into dark spots on the porch boards. He felt anger, yes, but underneath it was a familiar, uglier feeling, fear. Not fear of a man on a porch, fear of being helpless again. He looked up. 3 days, he repeated. Fine, I'll get it done. Hale nodded once as if relieved Logan hadn't made him a villain. He reached into his pocket and tore off a slip of paper with a number. Call this. It's the closest rural vet line that'll pick up in storms. Tell them it's urgent. Logan took the paper without thanks. His fingers were stiff. Hale's eyes drifted past him again. To Freya. She's protective, he said quietly. She's a mother, Logan snapped before he could stop himself. Hale didn't flinch. Yeah, he said softer. I can see that. For a moment, neither man spoke. The fire filled the gap. Atlas sneezed, small and sharp. Luna's paws shifted on the rug. Hale stepped back into the snow. I'll return in 72 hours, he said. Don't make me bring a cage. The words weren't a threat so much as a boundary. Still, they scraped. Logan didn't respond. He watched Hale walk down the porch steps and disappear into the white. When the door shut, the cabin felt too quiet, like the storm outside had moved in. Logan exhaled slowly and turned toward Freya. We'll fix it, he said, trying to make his voice sound like truth. I'll get the vet. I'll get the papers. You're safe here. Freya stared at him, eyes wide, wild, and suddenly unfamiliar. The warmth didn't matter to her the way it mattered to him. The fire didn't erase what she'd heard in the tone of that officer, in the word take that lived under every official sentence. Logan stepped closer, palm open, the same gesture that had saved them on the road. Hey, he murmured, look at me. You trusted me once. Freya's ears twitched. Then she moved. Fast. She nudged Atlas and Luna with her muzzle. One sharp push, then another, hurting them like she'd been training for this moment her whole life. The pups stumbled toward the back door, confused but obedient. Logan's stomach dropped. Freya, wait. She didn't wait. Her nose hit the latch and Logan realized with a sick jolt that she'd been watching him use it for weeks. One shove, then a second, and the latch popped. The door swung open and Winter rushed in. "Freya!" Logan lunged, but too late. She burst into the snow, Atlas and Luna tumbling after her in a frantic scramble of small paws. For one heartbeat, she paused at the tree line, turning her head back toward the cabin, toward Logan, eyes blazing with one message. They can't take us if they can't find us. Then she vanished into the storm with her babies at her side, leaving only 3 sets of paw prints already filling with snow. The back door hung open like a wound. Logan stood in the threshold, breath ragged, staring at the 3 sets of tracks cutting across the yard, 1 large, 2 small, before they vanished into the trees. Snow was already softening the edges, erasing proof the way Winter erased everything else. He took 1 step into the drift, another, then stopped. A part of him wanted to sprint, to throw himself into the forest with the same reckless certainty he'd used on missions. But the rational part, the part trained to survive, knew chasing blind could turn 3 missing lives into 4 dead ones. Still, his body didn't know how to be patient with loss. "Freya!" he shouted into the wind. The sound disappeared immediately, swallowed by the pines and snowfall. No answer, no bark, not even the whisper of movement. Logan's chest caved inward with a familiar violence, as if grief had found the same old door and kicked it open. The silence after something leaves, the hollow space where warmth used to be. He'd lived inside that silence since Claire. He closed his eyes, and for half a second he saw her again. Claire's face in the dash lights, hair stuck to her cheek, lips trembling as she tried to say his name. The way he'd carried her through snow until his legs failed. The way the world went quiet and stayed that way. Not again. Logan turned back inside and slammed the door shut, not to keep the cold out, but to keep himself from breaking in the doorway. His hands shook as he paced the cabin once, twice, like movement could shake loose a plan. On the table by the window sat the strip of leather he'd been working into a collar. A brass tag lay beside it, freshly etched with words he'd carved into metal like a vow. "Never leave your pack behind." He stared at the tag until his vision blurred. Then the front door opened. Maggie Rowe stepped in, stamping snow off her boots, lantern in one hand. Her scarf was wrapped tight, cheeks red from wind. She'd been coming more often lately, sometimes with soup, sometimes just with the calm presence that didn't require you to perform being okay. Her gaze swept the cabin once and landed on the emptiness by the hearth. The dog rug, the absence of movement, the way Logan stood too still. Maggie's face went grave. "Logan," she said softly. "Where are they?" He couldn't make his voice work for a beat. When it did, it came out low and ugly. "Gone." Maggie set the lantern down slowly on the table as if a sudden noise might shatter him. "What happened?" Logan's jaw clenched. "Wildlife officer, Wyatt Hale, said they weren't mine to keep unless I could prove it. 72 hours. Maggie's eyes flashed, not with panic, with anger sharpened by loss. And Freya heard that. Logan nodded once. She ran the second he left. Maggie stepped closer, her hands folding neatly in front of her like she was bracing herself. "Oh, honey." The 2 words hit harder than any speech. Logan dropped onto the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at the floorboards. He didn't want comfort. He wanted rewind. He wanted to go back to the moment on the road and do everything right enough to guarantee safety. But life didn't work that way. Winter didn't work that way. "They'll die out there," he said, voice flat because saying it out loud made it more manageable than screaming it. She was scared. She thinks running keeps them safe. Maggie crouched in front of him and her knees cracked softly with the movement. "Freya's not wrong to be scared," she said, "but she doesn't know you're about to fight for her." Logan let out a humorless breath. "Fight the state? They don't care what I feel. They care what forms I filled out." Maggie's eyes held his. Then we give them forms." He looked up, confused. Maggie stood and shrugged off her coat. She crossed to her satchel and opened it like she'd been preparing for this moment longer than he realized. Paper spilled out onto the table. Old certificates, registration documents, a faded adoption form, letters with official stamps. Logan blinked. "What is this?" Maggie's voice softened, but her hand stayed steady. "After Nate died, the Corps sent his dog's paperwork back with his effects. The German Shepherd in that photo you saw, his name was Briggs." Logan's throat tightened. "He had a dog." "Not in combat," Maggie said. "Before deployment. Nate rescued him as a teenager. Briggs slept beside my bed for years after I got the call. He wasn't a service dog, but he served all the same." Maggie tapped the top document. "These are breed and registration records. If we can show Freya is a domestic line, if we can connect her to local shepherd registrations, or even prove she's not hybrid, Hale has no ground to take her." Logan stared at the papers like they were a language he'd forgotten how to read. "But Freya's not Briggs." "No," Maggie agreed, "but these records show the county system, the breed verification path, the vet contacts. It's a map, and you," she met his eyes, "you are her rescuer, not her captor." The words landed in him like a match striking. Small light. Real light. Logan stood, pushing past exhaustion. "Even if we can prove it," he said, "it won't matter if she freezes tonight." Maggie nodded once. "Then you go now." Logan's gaze snapped to her. "You don't understand what that forest is like in a storm." Maggie's mouth tightened. "I understand what it's like to lose someone because you waited for permission." She touched the photo of Nate in the papers gently, almost reverently. "I won't watch you lose another family." Logan swallowed hard. He reached for his coat hanging by the door, then paused as his eyes fell again on the collar tag. He picked it up. The brass felt cold, even inside the cabin. He threaded it through the half-made leather strap, fingers moving fast. Not perfect, not pretty, but real. He clipped the buckle shut and held it in his palm like a promise he could carry. "I made this for her," he murmured. Maggie stepped closer. "Then take it." Logan grabbed a flashlight, extra batteries, rope, habit more than plan. His old pack still hung on a hook, the one he couldn't bring himself to throw away. He slung it over his shoulder, feeling the familiar weight settle between his shoulder blades like an old identity waking up. At the door, he stopped and looked back at Maggie. "If I don't come back—" Maggie cut him off with a look. "Don't talk like that." Logan nodded because he couldn't afford the luxury of fear right now. He opened the door and the cold rushed him again, sharp and absolute. Snow whipped across the yard, blurring the line between cabin and forest. Logan dropped to a knee at the edge of the porch and scanned the ground with his light. 3 tracks. Fading. But still there. He followed them into the trees. The forest swallowed him almost immediately. Darkness made the snow look deeper than it was, and the wind turned every branch into a moving shadow. Logan kept his beam low, hunting for indentations, for the subtle pattern of paws. 1 large print, 2 small ones. The pups didn't have the stride to go far without resting. Freya would be carrying fear like fuel, but fear burned fast. "Freya," he whispered, not shouting now as if the name itself might guide her back. "It's me, Logan." Nothing. He pushed on, deeper into the woods, where the snow drifted higher and the trees stood closer together. The tracks began to veer uphill. Logan's stomach tightened. Uphill meant away from the road, away from people, toward the ravine that cut through the mountain like a scar. He knew that ravine. He'd hiked it in better weather, steep walls, loose ground, ice that formed in sheets, a place that could take a body and keep it. He moved faster, breath burning. His headlamp swept across bark and snow. He found fresh claw marks on a pine, deep gouges where Freya had scrambled. The pup's prints staggered beside hers. Then he heard it, a sound so faint he thought at first it was wind slipping through branches. But it came again, broken, desperate. A whimper. Logan froze, light snapping toward the darkness beyond the next rise. The whimper rose from below. From somewhere the ground seemed to fall away. His chest tightened. No, he breathed. He stepped forward, and the forest opened to the edge of the ravine, a jagged drop into blackness. Logan dropped to his knees and aimed his flashlight down. "Freya!" he shouted, voice echoing off frozen walls. A weak bark answered. Alive. His beam caught movement 20 feet below. Freya pressed against the ravine wall. One leg twisted wrong. Atlas and Luna tucked beneath her like she was still trying to be their roof. Logan's heart slammed hard enough to hurt. He scanned for a path down. There wasn't one. There wasn't a path down. Just a steep, broken slope and a drop that looked carved by winter itself. The ravine wall glistened with ice, and the floor below was a mess of snow, rock, and shadow. Logan's mind shifted into a colder gear, the one that didn't waste time on panic. Distance, 20 feet. Surface, unstable. Visibility, poor. Temperature, lethal. Lives, 3. He pulled his pack off and dug for the rope coiled inside. Standard climbing line, leftovers from a life he pretended he'd put away. His fingers were clumsy in gloves, so he yanked them off and tied the knot bare-handed, skin stinging as cold bit deep. "You've done this 1,000 times," he muttered through his teeth. "Do it one more." He looped the rope around the thickest pine trunk he could find and tested the anchor with a hard tug. The trunk held. He tied a second knot, then wrapped the line around his waist as a makeshift harness. Not ideal. But nothing about tonight was ideal. Logan swung his flashlight beam down again. Freya's amber eyes flashed back at him. Even from this angle he could see the tremble in her body the way she was bracing her weight so Atlas and Luna stayed covered. One of the pups wriggled weakly and pressed its nose into her fur. Logan's throat tightened. "I'm coming," he called, voice low but firm. "Hold on." Freya barked once, thin and strained but unmistakably alive. Logan planted his boots and started down. The first few feet were manageable. He dug his heels into frozen dirt and leaned back into the rope's tension, moving inch by inch. Snow sifted under his boots in small slides. He kept his weight centered, breath controlled. Then the crust broke. The ground gave way beneath him with a sickening softness, and Logan slid several feet at once. The rope snapped tight against his waist, jerking him hard. Pain ripped through his left shoulder like someone had driven a spike straight into bone. Logan hissed, teeth clamping down on a sound that wanted to become a scream. Old injury. Torn once, never healed right. He hung there for a heartbeat, swinging slightly over the drop, shoulder on fire, fingers burning as he grabbed the line and steadied himself. Above him, the storm roared like laughter. Below, Freya's head lifted and she gave another weak bark. Urgent now, not for herself, but for him, as if she understood that one wrong move could kill them all. Logan forced air into his lungs. In. Out. In. Out. "Yeah," he rasped. "I hear you. I'm not stopping." He continued down, slower, using the rope more than his shoulder, careful to distribute weight through his legs. When his boots finally hit the ravine floor, his knees buckled with relief and pain. Up close, the scene was worse. Freya lay pressed against the wall, one hind leg bent at an ugly angle, fur darkened with blood where a deep gash cut through to raw flesh. Her chest rose in shallow pulls. Snow clung to her whiskers. Her eyes stayed bright, but the shine looked feverish, strained. Atlas and Luna were tucked beneath her body like two small secrets. Their fur was clumped with frost. Their bodies shivered in tiny, relentless tremors. Atlas lifted his head a fraction when Logan approached and let out the smallest whine. Logan dropped to his knees. The cold punched through his jeans instantly, but he didn't care. He set the flashlight down and slid his hands under the pups first, because they were the lightest, the most fragile. "Easy," he whispered. "I've got you." He wrapped Atlas in the emergency blanket from his pack and tucked him inside his coat against his chest. The puppy's body was so small it disappeared against him, but he felt the flutter of breath. Then he scooped Luna, wrapped her tight, and pressed her against Atlas. 2 warm sparks against his heart. Freya's gaze tracked every movement. She didn't try to bite. She didn't fight. She simply watched with the intensity of a mother deciding whether this human deserved to carry what mattered most. Logan leaned closer until Freya could hear him over the wind funneling through the ravine. "Good girl," he said, voice thick. "You kept them alive. Now let me get you out." Freya attempted to stand. Her leg folded immediately, and she let out a sound that ripped through Logan's chest. Pain held back as long as it could be held back. "No," Logan said quickly. "Don't. I've got you." He inspected the gash fast. Deep, jagged, bleeding slow now from cold. Her leg, either dislocated or fractured. He couldn't fix it here. He could only move her. Logan slid one arm under her chest and the other around her ribs, careful not to crush her. Freya's body tensed in reflex, then surrendered, pressing her head weakly against his shoulder. Logan's shoulder screamed in protest. He bit down hard, eyes watering from pain and cold. "Okay," he breathed. "Okay, up we go." He clipped the rope to his belt loop with a crude carabiner. Bad practice, but it would have to do. He tightened the line, tested it once, then began the climb. The ravine walls were slick. Logan dug his boots into tiny ledges, pulling with his legs and guiding with the rope. Freya's weight dragged at him like an anchor. Inside his coat, Atlas and Luna shifted, tiny whimpers vibrating against his chest. Every sound kept him moving. Halfway up, Logan's left shoulder buckled. Pain shot so bright it turned his vision white for a second. His boot slipped. Snow cascaded down, peppering his face. The rope jerked, biting deep into his waist. Logan gasped, clinging to the line. Below, the ravine yawned. He hung there, shaking, for one awful heartbeat. Then he heard it. A new sound, cutting through the storm. A brighter flashlight beam swept across the snow above. A voice called down, deep and steady. "Pierce, hold tight." Logan blinked frost from his lashes and squinted upward. Officer Wyatt Hale stood at the edge of the ravine, knees bent, gloved hands gripping a rope line. His breath clouded the air around his face. The beam from his light hit Logan's features and lingered as if confirming what he was seeing. Logan's first instinct was fury. Second was disbelief. Third was simple, bitter relief. Hale shouted again, louder. "You're out of your damn mind." Logan coughed a laugh that sounded like pain. "Not a new hobby." Hale's mouth tightened, almost a grim smile, almost a scowl. "I'm not letting you do it alone." Hale anchored his rope around a nearby tree with quick, practiced movements. Then he leaned back, bracing his weight, and began pulling. Steady, controlled, not jerking, like he understood how easily this could go wrong. Logan adjusted his grip and pushed upward with his legs, using Hale's pull to take strain off his ruined shoulder. The two men worked without another word, breath and effort forming their own language. Freya's head lolled against Logan's shoulder. Her breath was warm against his neck. Atlas whined faintly inside his coat. Logan's muscles burned. His shoulder felt like it was tearing apart. But the rope moved. The edge came closer. Finally, his hand found the lip of the ravine. Hale reached down, seized Logan's forearm, and hauled with a hard grunt that pulled them over the edge onto solid ground. They collapsed into the snow together. Logan on his side, chest heaving, Hale on one knee, both of them shaking as the wind tore past. Logan kept his arms locked around Freya like letting go would make the whole world disappear. The pups squirmed weakly, still alive. Hale stared at the scene for a long moment, his expression changing in slow steps, from official detachment to something like shock, then to something human. You risked your life, Hale said, voice quieter now. Logan swallowed and looked down at Freya's bloodied leg, at the pups pressed against his heart. His voice came out hoarse, stripped of pride. They're my family. Hale's eyes held on Logan's face. Then he nodded once as if accepting a truth he'd been trying not to see. Yeah, he murmured. I can see that. He shrugged off his own jacket and draped it over Freya, shielding her from the wind. We move now, he said, before the storm buries these tracks and us with them. Logan tried to stand and nearly folded from pain. Hale stepped in, gripping his elbow. Don't be stubborn. Logan barked a bitter laugh. Too late. Together they started back through the forest. Hale guiding with his light, Logan carrying Freya, Atlas, and Luna pressed inside his coat. The trees leaned close, snow whispering around them like ghosts. By the time the cabin lights appeared through the storm, dawn was beginning to pale the sky. And on the porch, lantern in hand, Maggie Rose stood waiting, hands clasped as if she'd been praying the whole night into existence. When she saw them, she gasped, a sound that broke into tears. Oh, thank the Lord. Logan staggered up the steps, face scraped, coat torn, blood streaked along his glove. Maggie rushed forward to help him settle Freya on the rug by the hearth. Hale followed carrying the pack and supplies, his breath still coming hard. Inside, the fire's warmth hit them like salvation. Maggie knelt immediately and began unwrapping Freya's leg. We need to clean this, she said, voice brisk but trembling at the edges. Bandage it. Keep pressure. And, Logan, your shoulder. I'm fine, Logan lied. Hale shot him a look. You're not. Logan didn't argue. He couldn't. The shaking had reached his bones. Maggie wrapped Freya's leg with clean gauze, hands steady as she worked. Atlas and Luna crawled out of Logan's coat and pressed against their mother, whining softly. Freya licked once, weak but deliberate, then let her head drop, breath still deepening. Hale stood near the doorway, watching the family reunite. The sternness in his face looked worn down by what he'd just seen. I'll have to file a report, Hale said at last. Logan's entire body went rigid. Hale held up a hand. Listen, it's going to say you rescued a domestic dog and her litter from a ravine. Nothing about hybrids, nothing about confiscation. Logan stared at him, not trusting his ears. Why? Hale's eyes flicked to Freya, then to the pups, then back to Logan. Because sometimes rules forget what they're for, he said quietly, and sometimes they need reminding. Maggie looked up at Hale, gratitude shining through tears. You're a good man, Officer Hale. Hale huffed a tired breath. Don't spread it around. I've got a reputation. For the first time in days, something in Logan loosened, just a fraction. Not relief, not yet, but a crack where hope could fit. Outside, dawn laid a pale gold line along the snowdrifts. Inside, the fire burned steady. Freya breathed, Atlas and Luna warmed against her, and Logan realized the 72 hours hadn't ended. They'd just begun. 72 hours kept ticking, even after the ravine let them go. Logan's shoulder throbbed like a warning siren. He swallowed the pain, picked up the phone, and called the rural vet line Wyatt Hale had given him. The ring felt endless. When someone finally answered, Logan's voice came out clipped and urgent, the way it used to when lives depended on clarity. German Shepherd. Mother and 2 pups. No records. Need breed verification, vaccines, registration, today. Hale stayed at the cabin through the morning. Not hovering, just present, stacking extra firewood by the door, checking Freya's bandage the way someone checks a perimeter. Maggie moved with quiet command, boiling water, sterilizing cloths, keeping Atlas and Luna from chewing the edge of Freya's wrap. Freya lay near the hearth, eyes half open, tracking every sound. Her injured leg was propped on a folded blanket. The pups, pressed against her ribs, their small bodies rising and falling in steady rhythm. Every now and then she licked the air as if tasting for danger. Logan crouched beside her and held up the half-made collar he'd carried into the forest. He'd finished it with shaking hands after sunrise, rough stitching, uneven edges, but solid. The brass tag flashed in the firelight. Never leave your pack behind. Freya sniffed it once, then looked away as if the vow was obvious. Yeah, Logan murmured. I know. By midday, a battered SUV with a faded clinic logo crawled up Logan's drive, tires fighting slush. A woman in a thick parka climbed out, gray hair stuffed under a knit hat, medical bag bouncing at her hip. She introduced herself quickly, Dr. Harper Lynn, then stepped inside and took one look at Freya's leg. Ravine? She asked. Logan nodded once. Doctor. Lynn crouched, checked the wound, the swelling, Freya's gums, her breathing. She's tough, she said, almost impressed. Then she glanced at Hale. And you're who I think you are. Hale's mouth tightened. Just doing my job. Dr. Lynn didn't argue. She scanned Freya's coat pattern, her head shape, her ears. She checked the pups, too. Listened to their hearts, felt their bellies, watched their eyes track movement. Atlas tried to lick her glove. Luna tucked closer to Freya, but didn't hide. Domestic, Dr. Lynn said finally, looking at Logan. Not a hybrid, not even close. Logan didn't realize he'd been holding his breath until it burst out of him. The relief didn't feel like joy. It felt like oxygen. Dr. Lynn pulled out forms and a small handheld scanner. We'll do microchips, vaccines. I'll write a letter for breed verification. You'll still need to file registration with the county, but this... She tapped the paper. This makes it simple. Hale leaned in. And the report... Dr. Lynn's eyes flicked to him. Your office can stop circling people who are doing the right thing. Hale's jaw worked once, then he nodded. I can. They worked in a tight, purposeful rhythm. Dr. Lynn chipped Freya first. Freya flinched but didn't snap. Logan kept his palm against her shoulder, murmuring low. Maggie held Atlas and Luna steady for their chips and shots, whispering, brave babies, like the words mattered. When it was done, Dr. Lynn handed Logan a packet thick enough to feel like armor. Keep this dry. Call me if the wound heats up or she stops eating. Logan nodded. Thank you. Dr. Lynn glanced at his arm where his sleeve hung oddly loose. And you? That shoulder isn't fine? Logan started to speak, but Hale cut in. He'll get it looked at. Logan shot him a look. Hale didn't blink. That night, Logan sat at the table with Maggie while snow tapped the window like fingertips. Papers covered the wood, registration forms, vaccine records, the breed letter, a temporary foster rescue permit Hale had pulled strings to fast-track. You didn't have to do that, Logan said, voice low, eyes on the ink. Hale stood near the doorway, hands in his jacket pockets. I didn't have to climb into a ravine either, he replied. Turns out I'm full of surprises. Maggie's mouth twitched. Don't get used to being likable, officer. Hale's expression softened, just a crack. No promises. Logan looked at Freya. She slept with one ear angled toward the room, the other toward the door. Atlas and Luna were piled against her belly, a tangle of paws and warmth. For the first time since the storm, the cabin didn't feel like a place he was hiding in. It felt like something he was holding. By early spring, holding wasn't enough. The idea came slowly, like thaw water finding a path through ice. It started with the collar on Freya's neck and the way Logan caught himself checking the road for other shapes in the snow. It grew each time Maggie mentioned veterans in town who'd come home and stopped answering calls. Each time Hale admitted, quietly, that he'd confiscated animals from people who loved them because the paperwork didn't match the heart. So, fix the system, Maggie said one afternoon, standing on Logan's porch with a clipboard like she'd already decided. Make a place the system can't ignore. Logan stared out at the clearing beyond the cabin. Open land, trees on the edges, room for fences. He flexed his injured shoulder and winced. Even pain couldn't kill the thought now. A haven, he said, testing the word. Hale nodded. A legal one. They built it the way broken people build anything that matters. Slow, stubborn, and with hands that didn't stop shaking until the work made them steady. Logan cut posts and set fence lines. Maggie filed forms and made calls. Hale brought permits and inspection checklists, then stayed late anyway, hammering boards as if he wanted the place to exist for his own reasons. Logan carved a wooden sign and mounted it above the gate in clean, deliberate letters. Silver Creek Haven, for those who served, on 2 legs or 4. The first intake arrived in early May. Working dogs with tired eyes and bodies that still braced for commands. An aging Labrador with cloudy vision, a shepherd who startled at every sudden sound, and a Belgian Malinois named Coda, muscles tight as wire, muzzle scarred, gaze locked on exits. Coda refused food the first day, then the second. Logan tried everything. Quiet space, soft voice, hand-fed pieces, letting Coda choose the distance. Nothing. That evening, Freya limped toward the kennel on her healing leg, tail low but steady. Atlas and Luna trotted behind her like small shadows. Logan watched, unsure what she intended. Freya lay down beside Coda's gate and simply stayed there. No pleading, no dominance, just presence. Coda paced, stopped, stared. Freya didn't move. She blinked slow. Minutes passed. Then Coda lowered his head and took one bite, then another. The bowl scraped softly against the floor. Logan felt his throat tighten. Maggie, standing behind him, exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for months. Hale's voice came quiet at Logan's shoulder. "Looks like she runs your base." Logan didn't look away from the kennel. "Good," he murmured. "Let her." Outside, the last snow melted into dark earth. Inside the fences, barking rose, loud, imperfect, alive. Logan rested his hand on Freya's neck and realized the deadline that had once felt like a countdown to loss had turned into a starting line. But even as the valley warmed, he noticed something he didn't say out loud yet. Freya's steps were slower than they used to be. Freya's slower steps turned the Haven's busiest season into something Logan couldn't ignore. It filled him with a quiet dread he hated, the kind that didn't announce itself until it was already living in your chest. So he started waking earlier, taking her out alone before the kennels stirred. Morning light washed the valley in gold instead of white now. The fields beyond the fence had gone soft with tall grass, and the pines smelled like sap and warming earth. From the far pens came the muffled clink of bowls and the occasional bark, Coda's sharper voice among them. Yet Freya walked as if she owned the silence. She didn't limp anymore. The ravine wound had healed into a pale line beneath her fur. But time had left its own marks. Gray dusting her muzzle, a heavier breath after short bursts, a carefulness in how she rose from the porch boards. Logan noticed it the way soldiers notice weather shifts. Subtle, undeniable, impossible to negotiate with. He kept their route short. Past the gate, along the edge of the clearing, down toward the open meadow where the creek braided through grass like glass. Freya would pause there, nose to the wind, eyes half-lidded, taking in the world as if she were memorizing it. Atlas and Luna barreled out later when the volunteers arrived and the day officially began. Atlas had grown into bold energy on 4 legs, always first to greet newcomers, always ready to chase a thrown stick as if the act itself was proof life could be simple. Luna stayed nearer Freya, circling back often, checking her mother with quick nudges, as if counting her the way Freya had counted them by the hearth. Maggie came by most afternoons now, clipboard under her arm, hair tucked under a sun hat. Wyatt Hale drove in twice a week for inspections that somehow always ended with him staying to fix a latch or carry feed bags. The Haven was real, legal paperwork stacked in a file drawer, fences standing straight, dogs learning that hands could mean gentleness again. And still, Logan's eyes kept returning to Freya. One evening, as the sun leaned low and the sky turned the color of a slow-burning ember, Freya stood at the gate and didn't go back inside when Logan called. She looked out past the fence line instead, toward the open valley, toward the far edge of land where the world didn't end but opened. Logan walked to her and rested his hand on her neck. Her fur felt warm under his palm. Not feverish, just alive. "You want out," he murmured, though the words were more for him than her. Freya's ears twitched. Atlas skidded to a stop behind them, tail high. Luna pressed close to Freya's shoulder. Maggie's voice drifted from the porch, gentle but certain. "She's telling you something." Logan didn't look back. He couldn't. He stared out at the meadow, and memory slid over the scene like a shadow. Another day, another season, the same land buried in blizzard. Freya's body, a shelter. 2 pups barely breathing. His hand reaching out, not sure if he deserved a second chance. Wyatt Hale came up beside Maggie, arms crossed, gaze on Freya. "If she runs," he said quietly, "she'll come back if she wants to. Nothing out there is illegal." Logan's throat tightened at the careful phrasing. If she wants to. Choice. The thing he'd been trying to give her since the road. He reached down and touched the brass tag hanging from Freya's collar. The words caught the last light. Never leave your pack behind. A vow carved in metal. Logan's attempt to make permanence out of fear. He'd believed it meant holding on no matter what. He'd believed letting go was the same as abandonment. Freya shifted her weight and looked up at him. Her amber eyes weren't begging. They weren't accusing. They were steady, like she'd been steady in the ravine, steady by the hearth, steady beside Coda when he couldn't eat. She had done her part. Now she was asking him to do his. Logan's hand moved to the latch. He opened the gate. The hinges creaked softly, the sound small against the wide evening. A breeze rolled in carrying wildflower and creek water. Atlas barked once, sharp, thrilled. Luna trembled with excitement, then pressed her nose into Freya's shoulder as if to confirm, "Are we really doing this?" Freya stepped forward. One step, then another, slow, deliberate, as though she was making sure Logan didn't change his mind. Logan forced his fingers to unclench from the gate post. He wanted to call her back. He wanted to bargain. He wanted to rewrite time until aging wasn't a thing. But he stayed silent. Freya reached the tall grass and stopped. For a heartbeat, the valley held its breath. Then Freya turned her head and looked back at Logan. The sunlight caught the gray along her muzzle, turning it silver gold. Atlas bounced at her side, impatient. Luna stood close, eyes wide, waiting for her mother's decision like it was law. Logan swallowed hard. His voice broke anyway. "Go on," he whispered. "You're free." Freya's tail lifted once, slow, certain. Then she moved. Not fast at first. A careful trot that smoothed into something stronger as if the open field reminded her what she had always been. Atlas surged forward with a joyful yelp, Luna chasing after, and the 3 of them flowed into the tall grass, weaving through wildflowers and dusk like they belonged to the land itself. Logan stood at the open gate until they were only moving shadows in the distance. His eyes burned. Tears slipped down without permission. But the feeling wasn't the hollow implosion he'd known after Claire. This wasn't loss. This was release. Behind him, Maggie's hand settled on his shoulder. Light, grounding. Wyatt Hale stayed back by the fence, pretending to study the latch, giving Logan privacy he didn't ask for but needed. When the last bark faded into the wind, Logan closed the gate gently, like closing a book you weren't sorry to have read. He walked back into the cabin as night settled warm over Silver Creek, and he sat at the table under lamplight with a pen in his hand. He didn't hesitate this time. He began to write Maggie a letter. Logan sealed the letter and set it beside Maggie's basket of herbs on the table. Outside, the night air was warm, the moon pale over the pines. Somewhere far out in the valley, a faint bark carried back, steady, familiar, like a promise that freedom wasn't the same as disappearance. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs hope today. And if you've ever loved something enough to let it go, drop a comment below. Your words might be the light for someone else in the dark. Subscribe for more true-to-the-heart stories of rescue, second chances, and the quiet kind of courage that changes everything.